Most of us were taught that being alone is a sign that something has gone wrong. We see it as a punishment, a gap in our schedule that needs to be filled, or a psychological wound that needs to be healed. Society conditions us to feel an immediate urge to reach for a phone or a friend the second the room goes quiet. But centuries ago, Niccolo Machiavelli noticed something different while watching the leaders of the Italian Renaissance. He saw that the people who could stand on their own, those who weren't destroyed by silence, were the ones who held on to power the longest. They had found a way to use isolation as a tool rather than a curse. To see the difference, look at the kind of isolation that comes from fear. When King Louis XVI felt his control slipping, he retreated behind the gilded walls of Versailles. He used his palace to hide from the reality of his kingdom, surrounding himself only with people who would tell him what he wanted to hear. This is what happens when we build a fortress. We shut the doors because we are afraid of what people think or because we can't face our own boredom. In a fortress, we aren't growing. We are just waiting for the world to go away, usually by drowning out the silence with digital noise. But there is another option. Instead of a fortress, we can build a laboratory. In a laboratory, you don't step away to hide, you step away to study. You use the quiet as a controlled environment where you can finally examine your own thoughts without everyone else's opinions getting in the way. When you shift your perspective this way, you stop being a victim of your loneliness. You start to see that quiet room as a space where you can begin the slow work of figuring out who you actually are when no one is watching. Taking that heavy, uncomfortable feeling of being alone and turning it into a sense of independence is a specific process. It's like a form of internal chemistry, taking the raw, messy experience of isolation and refining it until it becomes a source of strength. This process starts with a change in how we see our time. The first stage is simply acknowledging that this quiet space is clean material. It is a rare moment where your thoughts aren't being manufactured by an algorithm or a social group. It belongs entirely to you. Once you fully accept the silence, you begin the excavation. When we are distracted by work and friends, it's easy to ignore our fears and insecurities. But in the quiet of the laboratory, those hidden feelings come to the surface. You use this time to look at those difficult parts of yourself that you usually try to bury. This is often painful, but it's where the best work happens. Franz Kafka lived a life of deep, often agonizing isolation, using his nights alone to dig into the shadows of his own mind. He didn't write his stories to be famous. He wrote them because he was brave enough to face the parts of himself that most people spend their lives running from. This deep dive is a practical necessity. If you don't take the time to understand your own weaknesses in private, those same flaws will eventually catch you by surprise when you're back out in the world, dealing with the pressure of real life. After you've found those hidden parts of yourself, the third stage is about bringing them into the light. Instead of trying to stay polite by pretending your flaws don't exist, you accept them as a permanent part of who you are. You stop fighting yourself and start moving forward as one complete person. Now that you've cleared away the social static and accepted your flaws, you can begin building your own foundation. You stop making choices based on what will get the most likes or approval from your peers, and you start building a life based on your own internal logic and values. We see this in the life of Dante Alighieri. He was kicked out of his home and lost everything he had worked for. But in that wandering isolation, he didn't just give up. He used that time to write a masterpiece, constructing a massive intellectual world that would outlast the people who had exiled him. When you finish this work, you become the boss of your own internal world. Your sense of worth stops being something you borrow from the people around you and starts being something you own. No matter what happens in your social life, your internal foundation stays solid. This is the real reward of the laboratory. When the noise of everyone else's expectations finally stops, you are left with something very few people ever find: the sound of your own true voice, telling you exactly what you believe and who you want to be. However, simply being alone isn't enough. If you have no plan, isolation can quickly turn into a trap. Without any direction, the silence can lead to endless circular overthinking, where you just keep revisiting the same worries without ever finding a way out. To keep the laboratory productive, you need a routine. This means having small daily habits, like studying a new skill, physical training, or working on a project, that give your day a skeleton. These rituals keep you grounded and remind you of your purpose, even when there's no one around to give you feedback. You also don't have to feel lonely just because you are alone. By reading the work of great thinkers like Schopenhauer, you are effectively having a conversation with one of the sharpest minds in history. You are listening to someone who has already wrestled with the same questions you are asking today. It's also helpful to keep a physical record of your growth. Because you don't have the usual social markers of success, keeping track of your progress in a journal or a log gives you objective proof that you are moving forward. It turns your time in the laboratory into a series of visible wins. Eventually, you will be ready to return to the group. This isn't about hiding forever. It's about coming back to society with a level of clarity and confidence you didn't have before. You aren't returning as a person looking for a place to fit in. You're returning as a person who already knows where they stand. When you return with that kind of internal security, the way people treat you changes.
Neediness usually pushes people away, but a person who is genuinely comfortable on their own has a kind of magnetic weight. People are naturally drawn to someone who doesn't seem to be begging for their approval. The next time you find yourself in a quiet room, remember that you have a choice. You can pick up your phone and hide in the fortress of distraction, or you can take a breath, look at the silence, and begin the work of building yourself in the laboratory.